And I'll get us started. So again, good morning. I'm Troy Hartley. I'm the director of Virginia Sea Grant. Thank you so much for your interest in this potential funding opportunity and learning more about it. Um, I'm going to probably leave if it's okay with everybody, it's hard to see. I'm sharing my slides now. I'm going to probably leave them in this mode rather than slide mode. This way I get to keep your Zoom pictures up and I can see if people raise their hands or if there are questions popping up too. Um, and on the line from our side, kind of helping managing this, Sabine Rogers is our strategic partnerships coordinator. She'll be also managing and helping me manage questions as they come in. And Paul Battaglia, who's here with Clark Nexon and is working with us on this project and particularly some of the issues of adaptation R&D capacity in the state. And you'll see this in the agenda as we pivot to ask questions about that as well. So what I'm looking to do here today is I'll give you a bit of some of the context behind this project, and as well as diving more deeply into the funding opportunity itself. This is monies that we are pooling from Virginia Sea Grants funding. We get our federal research dollars through NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and from a project that we're leading with Go Virginia funding. And Go Virginia is a state economic development funding source. And the work is really focused on the idea of coastal resilience and adaptation innovations and potential economic development opportunities in solving these challenges that we're facing here in Virginia, and that we're facing them a decade or so before other states are going to be facing them. Or we're experiencing this today, right? The water's coming. And kind of the broader context of this particular Go Virginia award and that are feeding into this call for the $1 million competition that you guys are looking at now is this Go Virginia project, and there are kind of four components to it. We're going to be focusing on two in this webinar, but one is a business plan competition that our partner RISE, a nonprofit out of Norfolk, has been administering, and the focusing on particularly coastal rural issues and challenges emerging from climate change impacts, and thinking about how to solve those problems and what business innovation exists in that domain. And that process is well along the way. The call was out late last year, early this year. We had about 17 concepts proposed. There are now 7 finalists, and I'll present a little bit of information on those. And those finalists are going through a pitch a business pitch later this month, and we'll have at least 5 of those moving forward into the funding stages. So they're getting funds to implement their innovation on publicly owned waterfront properties. And what we're looking to do is partner those 5 with university capacity to be helping them both assess the product or technology or design that they are putting forward, as well as assessing its kind of the innovation, the introduction of that innovation onto a property. What does that do for resilience at that scale? So this $1 million call is for that purpose. It's looking at identifying the capacity in Virginia at our universities for working collaboratively with businesses to both help them with their product validation and improvement, but also to be understanding resilience at the property scale. And that's probably the bulk of this webinar is going to be focusing on that topic, and I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions about that, and we'll dive into that. The second objective in this webinar, which is it's a different question, it's kind of going to ask you to pivot a little bit and think differently, is about the opportunity that the waterfront properties present as a field station for R&D in resilience and in adaptation innovations and things that we could be doing at that scale. That's another component of the Go Virginia Award. There is an agreement between Virginia Sea Grant and the Public Access Authority, which is the entity, the government entity that has over 50 waterfront properties in the Middle Peninsula in a coastal rural context, of which we'll be leveraging to conduct this research. So we're going to be asking you questions as well about kinds of things you'd like to do in the field. This is more broadly even than this immediate opportunity. This capacity existed in Virginia. How could you see yourself leveraging it? And the fourth component is a business consortium effort that our partner at Old Dominion University is leading, facilitating conversations among the business community around best management practices and other topics associated with adapting. So the statement of qualifications that you've been looking at and are hopefully preparing some narratives to submit. Higher education institutions in Virginia are those that are eligible. We are looking to fund up to 5 two-year awards, and those could be in the 200 to 250K range. There is no match requirement on these funds, nor is there necessarily a limit on the number of awards that we could provide to any individual institution. Again, what we're looking for is matching the capacity, the R&D, the research capacity of a university with the particular business competition winners, both in doing product validation and in assessing the impact on the property. We're going through sort of a two-step process in this funding call. The first is a statement of qualifications. So it's less about a proposal asking you to do particular research. It's more about what qualifications and experiences do you, your unit, or your university, center, department, whatever scale, you have both in the scientific and technical capacity area, but also within collaborative research. Have you worked with the private sector before? What's that experience been like? And then the second phase will be the actual development of a work plan and a budget. And so that kind of comes later, comes after the matchmaking between the qualifications and the business winners. When we started the business plan competition, the first step, building off of a lot of adaptation planning and action planning that had been developed in the rural coastal Virginia area, Go Virginia's Region 6, you'll hear us call it that sometime. And these types of challenges that they were facing were kind of falling into 3 buckets. And this is what we asked the business community to think about. One is how you manage flooding in a coastal rural context where there's ditches and not large infrastructure for stormwater management. Another set that was dealing with protecting your buildings and your properties from saltwater intrusion, from flooding, whether it be storm surge or even just high precipitation rate leading to flooding, coupled with high tides, the kind of flooding we're experiencing in the coastal area frequently now. And then the implications for that for septic systems and wells and road access and buildings. And then within that context, how do you also ensure you're protecting water quality and thinking about water quality management? So again, the septics and well water and those sorts of issues. And it's this portfolio of challenges that we put out in the business plan competition, and we got those responses from those 17 different responses, of which we ended up focusing in on 7. And these are the finalists for the Coastal Rural competition. And these are the ones that will be making their pitches at the end of the month. There's three firms here: AE Tech, Triangle Environmental, Water Warriors, all of whom are working with kind of more of a physical chemical strategy for taking nutrients out of water, um, and are thinking about its applications in septic systems in particular, um, as well as potentially other applications of their technology. Two of the projects, Sculptor House and Home Mechanics, are focusing on elements of a built home. Home Mechanics deals with issues in moisture control, particularly in crawl spaces and in basements, and thinking through how to minimize damage of a home when water gets introduced to the property. Sculptor House is an approach to building that's providing sort of some rapid ability to assemble and potentially disassemble and retreat home. And Natrix is doing a new form of kind of offshore oyster reef construction that also is potentially leveraging dredge material and a more hybrid green-gray type infrastructure for a barrier in the water to address wave energy and the like. And then Biogenic Solutions Consulting, they actually have a team that's taking a fairly integrated approach, thinking through living shoreline design, marsh design, integrating green-gray infrastructure a bit with also rehabbing some public access boat ramp, also alternative uses of dredge material and aquatic plant production. So one of the elements of the call, which I don't think, I think each of these projects are representing a piece of it, but there was also a vision that there could be the potential for highly integrated solutions that are thinking about design by almost redefining the property from open water through living shorelines up onto landscaping and the home or building design itself. And if you thought of that whole unit as a system, might you design something differently or build something differently in any one of those elements? That's I think a bit of both the potential of the R&D capacity and also what we were looking for in the call. And I think we have elements of all of them in here. So what comes next for you folks and thinking through a submission is first establishing an account in the EC grant portal. This is a very typical kind of proposal submission portal. You'll go in, you'll create an account that'll open up the enter the fields to let you enter the data that's being requested. Again, we're really interested in seeing what your scientific and technical capacity is in the topical areas, and what your experience has been with collaborative research with industry. There, we're asking for an 8-page narrative per topical area, and the call for qualifications that lays out some of the elements of what we're looking for in that narrative, and 2-page CVs for all the key personnel associated with the project and the capacity. There's no limit to the number of narratives that an individual institution could submit, but we are looking for you to focus an individual narrative on an individual topical area. So you don't have to, and then you can submit on as many topical areas as you'd like. March 31st is the deadline, and since it's just a qualification statement and CVs at this point, there's no budget needed, and So we're hoping, I mean, this is purely your own institution's policies, but we're hoping that probably means you don't have to run something through a sponsored programs office, or to just hopefully simplify that. So that's what we were going to at least cover. Now we're going to pivot into some questions. Let you ask any questions you have about the qualifications. If you have them now or you want them later, you can also reach out to myself or Sabine Rogers at Virginia Sea Grant for further questions. And then after we go through questions that you may have, we're going to pivot to Paul Battaglia, who's going to be talking a little bit. As I mentioned before, we're making this pivot. This other set of questions we're interested in hearing from you about is the R&D capacity itself. And if you had access to this, not even just for this competition, but more broadly for your own research portfolio and your own research agendas, how might you see yourself using or leveraging that kind of capacity? But before we go to Paul, I'm going to stop sharing and let you folks ask any questions you might have about the call for qualifications.
Hi, Troy. This is Taylor Sloy. I'm with Old Dominion University. I just wanted to quickly clarify, and I think you did clarify this, that you recommend teams focus on one particular topical area in their narratives. And I'm wondering if, do you prefer that we submit multiple narratives focused on each individual topic area, or if we have a team that could potentially kind of do this integrated, emphasize multiple strategies between these different topical areas, if you'd prefer, one team from a single institution to do that?
Yeah, I think keep good question, Taylor, and I think it we definitely see there's two parts of what I want to say and clarify here. One is that there will be a matchmaking process that will happen later, and there could be opportunities to team up, even across universities later. But that doesn't have to happen at this stage. The qualification stage, I would keep a qualification narrative just to that topical area, but you could certainly add a note to say, this team is integrated with these other narratives are being submitted too. So you can point us in a narrative to other submissions that are complementary, that provide you those opportunities to do that kind of integrated work, but keep the qualifications as crisp as you can to the topical areas.
Okay, thank you so much for the clarification.
Hi, Troy. I had a question too, if we can just speak out.
Sure, please go ahead, Celeste.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks very much. My question is about similar to what Taylor was asking, but cross-institutional collaborations. Let's say I wanted to work with ODU and Virginia Tech or something like that. When does that happen? It sounds like there's a matchmaking process happening down the road, but not just yet. Can you clarify that?
Absolutely, you're exactly on point. There is the opportunity to build collaborative teams at the work plan stage, but I wouldn't encourage us to do that here. I'd encourage you to focus on what capacity you're bringing to the table and your unit. Again, similar to the note that I made to Taylor about, you can add a comment in your narrative somewhere that's pointing to either other narratives from your own institution, or even your own willingness to collaborate with other institutions. And that could even get integrated in. It's very common that there's that kind of collaboration in our state, and it could even, you may have had some experience with that in the collaborative research space. We've been working with this company. Here's an example, and with this team, there's 3 other people from 2 other institutions. So something that could illustrate some of that experience too. It's probably the best way to be highlighting that's capacity you have and interest and willingness that you have as well. Hi, Stephen.
Good morning. Thanks for the info. Along the same line of questioning, would you expect one statement from a university? I'm at Virginia Tech. Could there be multiple first phases here from an individual institution?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
So Troy, sorry, well, I have a follow-up question. I'm just trying to get this right. And it seems like everybody's on the same page here is, so from Virginia Tech or George Mason, there's like 600 of us. So we're really looking for a narrower, like, okay, this is me, or this is a subset of 2 or 3 of us that would like to focus on this topic area. And there could be multiple teams within an institution targeting the same focus area, correct?
That is correct.
Perfect. All right, that makes sense.
Would you be able to provide a timeline for when you expect to select these final businesses and when to expect the kind of step 2 applications to start?
Yeah, no, good question. I'm sorry, I forgot that. I probably should have been, I think I may have said that before. So the end of this month, the businesses are making their pitch. So by early April, we'll know the finalists and kind of have a better feel for the exact kind of capacity we'll need. And so we're envisioning by middle to late April, we'll be launching conversations with teams about the, could be about pooling some teams and capacity from multiple places, could be saying, okay, this is what we're needing, start the conversations. And that will involve potentially conversations directly with the business participants as well, to start fleshing out those work plans. The money is in hand. We could get, as quickly as you can get to work plans finalized, budgets run through sponsored programs offices, awards in place, which by itself can take sometimes, a month or so at least. We could get start dates as early as May. We are anticipating that, as you can imagine, the way this process will work out too is as these innovations are being proposed for a particular property, we're also matching properties. Right now we have about 50 properties in the portfolio, but an individual company probably won't be working on all 50. We're working on a subset, which property best matches up to their needs. And I think the university's in that conversation too. Then there will be a permitting process that we're facilitating. So I'm anticipating it'll be probably the fall before people will start to get working on the field in the properties itself. But if stars align, it could be a little faster than that.
Hey, Troy, Tom Allen.
Hi, Tom.
Quick question. Could you elaborate any more on these properties? I think you mentioned they were public properties and, issues of accessibility, or is there an inventory or anything like that yet?
Yeah, we're, and I think, Sabine, maybe you could put wateradaptationeconomy.org, the website, in the chat box. This is the beginning of fleshing out a little bit of identifying what those properties are. There's about 9 or 10 of them are identified on this site already. These seem to be the most promising for opportunities. These are they're going to be rural, waterfront properties, a mix of residential and ag and forested properties. They, I think about 5 or 6 of them have buildings on them and homes on them. They were donated into the Public Access Authority for the very reason because they are vulnerable. They are flooding now. Road access is sometimes challenging. Water access there's a barrier island in the mix. There's a 150-acre property with a 7,000 square foot home on it and a pool house and a boat and a big garage that had a canal built on it and was plotted for development. There's others that are smaller properties that everything's on the waterfront, everything's vulnerable, everything's experiencing the impacts of climate change and flooding right now. In the big picture, as you step back and you think about some of the things that Paul Battaglia is going to ask us about, and you think beyond this call, and if this capacity existed in Virginia and you could be doing the research kind of work that you guys do on these properties, I think it's fair to recognize they're vulnerable now. They're going to get they're continuing to be vulnerable. Access will be even harder over time. The barrier island may disappear. New properties will get entered into the portfolio as they get donated to. And so it's a fairly dynamic kind of potential field station kind of arrangement. For different properties, we will have different detailed data available now on things like soil conditions, vegetation, wave energy. Some of that will vary from property to property in terms of what we know so far. Is there such a thing as, in Zoom, you wait for just that enough of an awkward pause in your classroom that someone's going to ask a question, someone's going to question, you don't want to let it go, you want to let it go, you want to let it go. I think I've passed that time in Zoom. I don't know. If you have additional questions, even as you're starting, continuing to pull together narratives, and if you have questions as you're getting closer to the deadline, you feel free to reach out to us. We will be, I haven't quite got there yet, but we'll be posting a frequently asked questions summary on the website too. I think you've hit a lot of those questions already here that we've been hearing too. So you're right on point on those things. But what I think I'll do now is pivot. Not seeing any questions in the chat to our partner Paul Battaglia with Clark Nexon, and we're asking you to kind of shift gears a little bit here in your head away from thinking in the specifics of this call for qualifications and that partnering with businesses and what do we bring to the table and what our qualifications and capacity is right now, to another conversation that's thinking about what the future could look like if Virginia could leverage this capacity and promote Taylor, the point you raised about collaborative research across your disciplines as well as across sectors. What would that R&D capacity look like? I will hand off to Paul. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Troy. Thank you. Yeah, so it's said that a lobster is one of those creatures who can point one eye in one direction and another eye in another direction and consider more than one thing at the same time. So in that spirit of both and, while you're finishing the specifics of your proposal for part of this resiliency challenge, we're also looking to collect information about how and what else you will need in order to do either this specific research project or even research more broadly to support your capacity. So I'm Paul Battaglia. I'm an architect with Clark Nexon. We've been swimming in this network for a while. Some of you I've met, some of you we've worked with, some of them we've not worked with yet, but we're looking forward to doing that at some point. So hello and good to see you. For those I recognize, and to the others, hello and welcome, and I look forward to working with you at some point in the future. So capacity is one of those manifold terms, and I'm here to explore further, address one aspect of capacity, and that of course comes from my position as an architect. So I'm talking here most especially about capacity as physical and functional space. In terms of research and development capacity, what do you need in order to be able to do things, or in order to be able to put things? Again, these are physical or functional components. It's what we call in our language as architects, the programming elements. Some of you have probably been involved in facility design. And so we're looking for you to express to us, to describe as much as you can, what kind of capacity, what kind of things you need, either at all these individual public access lands, the field stations, or perhaps also at a research and design hub facility. And so you can describe what you would want or what you might need. And you should probably be thinking about it, not just in terms of you yourself, but also you and the projects that you're contemplating, and also what your partners might be contemplating. So, you know, your collaborators, either within your institution or within private industry, what kinds of things will you be doing and what will you need to do that? It could be in terms of supporting science. It could be the project itself, or it could be in terms of supporting the staff who are working there. And you should also be considering both antecedent and concurrent activities. So what do you need to do before you do your research, or what would you need to do while you're doing your research, or perhaps even after? And as practical components, yeah, this could be a wet lab or a dry lab or some kind of collaboration area, a whiteboard space, an office, an administration area. It could be a shop. It could be a fabrication area. It could be an assembly area or a laydown area. It may be somewhere where you can do data or IT. It may be technologies. It may be methodologies, maybe modalities, or even some special equipment. But is there something that you might need to bring, or something you might need to stage, or something you need to assemble, or something you need to deploy? Maybe it's an outside space. Maybe it's a covered space. Maybe it's a fully conditioned space. But if you could be thinking of these things while you're also preparing your grant and listing those, I believe we asked for them on page 6, item 2D, 2 delta, is where we're looking to collect those things. Tell us whatever you think you know, or whatever you think you suspect. We're willing to meet you wherever you are in terms of being able to, as far as you currently are in terms of your development of your understanding of what these things could be. If you know more or less exactly what they are, you can tell us that. We would like to know how many and approximately how big, and where they might be. Would they be at a more centralized hub, or would they be at a site, one of the PAA sites, or some of the different sites? Anything you could tell us about adjacency or proximity. This needs to be near that. This needs to be immediately next to that. That would be helpful as well. And additionally, any information you can tell us about what kind of requirements and/or generosities you might have about their use. So could they be shared with somebody else? Could they be shared with another team? Or do you really need them to yourself? And how frequently would you use them? Are these daily things? Are they monthly things? Are they yearly things? In terms of meeting you where you are, in terms of your understanding, we'll take anything. So you can give us a full description if you have a full description. If you have an image or you have a photograph of something, we'll take that too. We'll even take kind of like statements. So you can say something kind of like this or kind of like that, and give us a reference. We can always double back and ask further questions and dig into it a little more deeply in order to address your needs and aspirations a little more directly, or a little more precisely. We would ask that you be thoughtful, not necessarily greedy, right? You can think about whether these things are falling into the realm of needless duplication of facilities or functionalities that you already have. But then again, you know, as a counterpoint, it may be important that they're somewhere in specific, so we might need to duplicate them. So use your judgment. I know that you can understand whether something is necessary or critical or significantly better, and so we ask you to think about it in those terms. We'll be explicit about kind of why we're asking you this. There's 2 reasons. One, because it will help assist us as we consider what kind of facilities will need to be provided in order to support your needs. And we want to do that effectively and efficiently, end up with the best and the highest use of the available space and and outfit that accordingly. More broadly, we're also convinced that these kinds of questions may be of benefit to you, perhaps more directly than they are to us, because we can be thinking about the nature of your associations and your partnerships and your collaborations, and what do you need and why might you need that, so it can further pique your own interest and excitement for the possibility of this project. So we also should mention here that we allow that the answer might be nothing. It might be sufficient just to have access to these properties. But if it's not just nothing, and there are something more, or some things that more specifically could be provided, you know, beyond kind of the sites themselves and the portfolio of the physical properties, which you'll be able to view through the website, then please do let us know that. So these have been largely rhetorical questions, right, toward the purpose of getting you to think about what you might need. My final question will have a practical tone. Do you have any questions about what we're requesting?
Hi, Paul. I have a quick question for you.
Yeah, great. Higher.
Where do you envision these potential structures, spaces, and I obviously know that there's going to be some that would fit right into perhaps one of the field sites or perhaps somewhere else. But I guess where do you envision these spaces being developed or built in a very general sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Eric. So as we become more specific about them, I believe we'd be negotiating that with each of the teams, right? Like, let's say for your project, you needed it at one of the sites because that site best fit what you needed. Well, then we'd figure out whether we can in fact devote those particular resources to that particular site, or perhaps we could be clever about it. Maybe there's a way to deploy it locally for a time, but then be able to relocate it and redeploy it elsewhere when it has a higher or better use there. In terms of the research and design hub facility, I know that several sites there are being considered, but we do not have a specific location. So you won't find that, for example, in the inventory of public access authority locations the way you will for any and all those other sites. So that's a little bit to be determined. But we'll be negotiating that and perfecting our understanding.
All right, great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And I can add a little bit to that from the standpoint of the Go Virginia community and the economic development community was seeing opportunities in this domain. And that's why the planning work has been driving towards trying to understand, is there an R&D kind of capacity component here to a broader, they call it kind of innovation ecosystem that can produce commercialization opportunities as well as other types of innovation. And the field stations is, as we were talking with Tom about, right, they're vulnerable places. So you don't want to put a whole bunch of infrastructure out there because it ain't gonna last, and you don't want to. But where that collaborative location, hub could be, is still to be determined. But it's also being facilitated, at least to the point of potentially fleshing this thing out between Virginia Sea Grant and the Public Access Authority, and thus is a multi-university entity. So there could be elements of what capacity exists at each of the member institutions or any institution in the state where you're doing a lot of your work there, but there could be opportunities to get closer to the field stations and be doing some final work closer to field stations. So even just that proximity to home institutions, proximity to field stations, all of that becomes probably part of the calculus to be thinking about where an optimal location would be as well.
How might you recommend in our proposals that we emphasize that we could do the work without said facilities, but said facilities would be beneficial and excellent to help facilitate it? My worry is that we would disqualify ourselves for asking for too much when we could be doing it without.
For my purposes, I like the way you said it, Taylor, right? Like this would be a betterment it could help us, and perhaps you could even start to describe the case for that. But if you were also to say we don't absolutely need to have it, I think that's a judicious description.
And I'd also add, I think that you're doing exactly what we were asking for, kind of thinking out and setting this up in the beginning of this webinar, right? There's, what are we trying to do for this particular call, for this partnership with these businesses? We're not going to end up having new facilities between now and the time the collaborative research project's taking place. So that's really is going to be leveraging your existing capacity, facilities, as well as your people and just those internal capacities you have. And so what you might say about where future opportunities go doesn't in any way harm your qualifications and assessment of your potential match for the call, for the collaborative research.
Yes, and I particularly appreciate it for just that, right? So Taylor, again, if you were to describe it, we don't have to have it, but it would be good. Then it's on our kind of collective radar, right? In terms of what we need at some time when we're able to do that. Thank you. Kelso?
Hi, Paul. I just wanted to, in the spirit of shifting gears here from the proposal to this, I just wanted to say that I think this is phenomenal. And I wanted to highlight something you said about just doing just nothing and just having the sites. And I think that's already magnificent, like just having a place in which we can do research, and that reduces the impact on public lands. Because as of now, we have to go to public lands and we have to work with the managers and getting permits and all that kind of stuff that goes with it. And then we're always worried about the safety of the sensors when we're doing this, and we're leaving them. So that's always in the back of our minds, is this safe? Is it the sensor going to be there when I go back? And all of that. I think having this network of field sites that we can access, and then having an ease of permit for that, because they're going to be designed for research. So that's the whole point. So just by having that available for the Commonwealth and for all the researchers here, I think that's already phenomenal. So even without much infrastructure, just by having a network that we can use for research, I think that's already a game changer. So if you're able to put some infrastructure on it, that's paradise, right? But even just by having this network available to us, I think that's great for many years to come, for NSF grants and for other, like for NOAA and like many other agencies. We can take advantage of having the field sites to do long-term research actually at those sites. So I just wanted to applaud that. This is cool. Like regardless of this call, I think this is really cool.
Thank you. We're equally bullish with our enthusiasm, but it's nice to get it reciprocated, right? That's affirming. Thank you.
So Paul was channeling his inner Ted Lasso at the beginning and noted, everyone should be, he didn't say be a goldfish. He said, be a lobster with looking in, multiple directions at the same time. And I think it's both been the exciting opportunity that this Go Virginia project has enabled, but there's a lot of moving parts in it, and it's kind of complicated. So it's not a typical kind of call for proposals so I appreciate that we are asking some different things of you than are maybe kind of your norm, and appreciate your interest and willingness to think like a lobster.